So this is a remarkable time, a remarkable life. First of all, my condolences, because I know you became very close to the justice. And I'm sorry, it's a loss for all of us, but I know particularly for you. But give us some sense, having spent so much time close to her, what did you get to see about the greatness that maybe some of us didn't get to see just watching her on the bench?
You know, Justice Ginsburg was a surprising person in many ways. I mean, she was shy and retiring and super serious, and yet she had an extraordinary sense of humor. And she just loved to laugh. I think that was part of the reason why she was able to maintain such great relationships with all of her colleagues on the Supreme Court and really with everybody who worked with her, including her famous friendship with Justice Scalia. But it was, it was really interesting to get a little bit of a window into how practical she was, how strategic she was. She was a very strategic person, and I think you see that in a lot of her rulings. I mean, look, just an honor of a lifetime to be able to tell her story.
One of the things that strikes me as remarkable is, again, we forget when she started out, it was not recognized that the Constitution, particularly the Equal Protection Clause, even applied to women particularly.
I know.
And she systematically, over a period of years, I got to see one of her arguments in the Supreme Court when I was clerking there. She went about systematically sort of dismantling that and saying, no, Equal Protection Clause does apply. And yet she never became strident. She was strong in the view, but she, at least in my experience, she was never strident.
No, and I think she prided herself on that. How great for you that you got to witness that. Did you get a sense of, at the time, wow, this is something really different here?
Yeah, I mean, she was in the course of systematically, as I say, dismantling these laws, and it was pretty clear she was going to win. That particular case was an Alabama statute about women being excused from grand jury duty as a favor to them. And but one of her themes, as you know, is don't do us any favors.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, supposedly we're protecting you. Well, the protection turned out to be a kind of cage, as you know. I mean, it really is interesting to think about what our lives were like back then. A woman could just be fired for being pregnant. A wife had to get her husband's permission to get bank credit. And, in many states, a married man could not be charged with raping his spouse. I mean, these were things that were just kind of woven into the law and practices. And it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg who thought that the U.S. Constitution should treat every American equally, regardless of gender. But, one of my favorite quotes in our interview, actually really the favorite, when she said, when we're asking her about taking this on, she said, well, I thought of myself as a kindergarten teacher because the justices didn't think that discrimination existed. They just didn't get it. And I love that, not a teacher, a kindergarten teacher.
Exactly. And she had a lot of teaching to do, and they were all men she was teaching for the most part.
And she wasn't going to do it by yelling at them. She was going to do it by convincing them.
Well, and she was that way when I saw her in oral argument. She did not raise her voice at all. She stood up to Justice White, who was really trying to push her around a bit. And she was very determined, but very mild-mannered. How much of her attitude toward women came from her mother? That's quite a story with her mother and what her mother did and tried to do for her. But also her remarkable, really equal relationship with Marty, her husband, himself a remarkable tax lawyer, a brilliant tax lawyer.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, her mother was the most influential person in her young life. Her mother was, from all accounts, very smart, but had not been able to go to college because in her family, the boys were sent off, and there was a boy who went to college, not her mother. And so after her older sister died quite young, Ruth Bader became the object of all her mother's attention, an only child, and her mother would take her to the library and she would expose her to music and to concerts. And you got a sense that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was so proud of her mother. She used to say, what's the difference between a bookkeeper and a Supreme Court justice? One generation. I mean, she felt, that she was carrying on what her mother could have done. So I think that was, obviously her mother died when she was 17, just on the eve of her graduation from high school, but, had given her a great grounding. And then, of course, there's Marty, who she met in college and famously said was because, you see in the pictures from the documentary, she was a beautiful woman with no lack of suitors. And yet she says that Marty Ginsburg was the first boy who cared that I had a brain. And he saw in her the brilliance that eventually was displayed to the rest of us. He believed in her, and he really wasn't threatened by her in any way. He became a lawyer, an extremely successful tax lawyer. But when the time came, he stepped back a little bit in order to allow his wife to shine and fulfill her promise.
Betsy, do you have a sense of what she made of the court toward the end of her time? Because she was there for 27 years. The court evolved. It changed in various ways. One of them was it became more conservative overall. She started out with some majorities. She ended up a very, very effective dissenter. It also became more political. It became much more, at least in the public eye, the subject of a lot of politics. What did she make of that?
Well, I can't say exactly. I know that she maintained very good relationships with all of her colleagues on the court, including her more conservative colleagues, no matter what her private feelings must have been. I think she really felt that it was extremely important to have civil discourse. And as you say, I mean, she dreamed, I'm sure, of writing many majority opinions, but she wound up being the great dissenter. And then she had to accommodate herself to the idea that perhaps she was writing these dissents for the ages and the hope that they would be quoted or used in majority opinions down the line. And we'll see whether or not that happens. But, she was a pragmatic person. And one of the things about having great relationships with your colleagues is perhaps you'll be able to pull them over to your side once in a while, which I think she did, certainly with Justice Roberts a few times.